Starting tonight with the question of whether the Labour Party is in crisis. Yesterday, Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff quit amid fears that her role was becoming, in her words, a distraction from the government's work. OK, this comes as today a new YouGov poll has found that a majority of Britons describe the Labour Party as sleazy. Alistair Campbell weighed in today saying that Labour governments are basically held to a much higher standard compared to Tory governments. So the freebie and donation row is rumbling on. Starmer's shuffling his backroom staff. Are they in chaos? Bill, let me come to you. It's not a great start. It's going to be 100 days this weekend, 12th of October. There have been some moments which you think, if you'd sat down and thought, what would be the worst possible thing that could happen in the first 100 days? Seeing the prisoners come out, popping champagne corks and saying, I'm always going to vote for Keir Starmer. You couldn't have thought that up if you thought of the most nightmare scenarios. So he's had these, you might call them comms disasters, I would call them policy disasters perhaps, getting rid of Sue Gray, who may not mean a lot to the people at home because we don't necessarily know who these civil servants are. Has she just been dispensed of in order to appear to be doing something to get his house in order?
Well, look, I'll acknowledge it's not been a good few weeks. I've worked with Sue Gray when I was a government minister, and I've got a lot of time and respect for her. But this couldn't be allowed to go on. You know, she has become the story. I think there are question marks about her political nous, her political judgment. And I think what Keir has demonstrated yet again is he's utterly ruthless when he needs to be in making key decisions. The criticism I would make is it's gone on for too long. And that is a concern I have about Keir, that sometimes he takes too long to reach decisions and conclusions, and all the while we're being challenged over what we're doing.
But her political judgment is no different than it was 6 months ago. You know, it's no different when he hired her. Surely that means that his judgment of her wasn't good.
Well, I think it may have been the wrong choice, and her transition from the civil service to the political arena has come unstuck. But I think the other lesson out of this, and Alistair Campbell was talking about this today, and he's got real insight, you need constantly in government to be explaining on a day-by-day basis what the government is doing, why it's doing it, how it's doing it, to give a sense of momentum moving forward. And I think that's what's been lacking during our initial period in government.
Steve, is that your assessment of the situation? Because I think I'm quite clear about this government's policy. It appears to just be to take as much tax as possible, spend as much public money as possible, make us as poor and as cold as possible. So I'm under no illusions, and control as much as they possibly can. So is it just a massive comms fail then?
No, of course it's not. It's a massive failure of organisation within Downing Street. I mean, they've managed to achieve in about 14 weeks what took us 14 years and a couple of existential crises to achieve in terms of level of chaos. And it's a sign that the Downing Street operation was not set up well, that lines of authority, actually, not just communication, but lines of authority weren't well defined. And like Bill, I worked with Sue Gray while I was in government, and she's a very professional lady. But it's pretty clear that it didn't work when she was moved into Downing Street. And, you know, it's not actually funny, because our country has to be governed like this, and it's turned into a clown show, and it's turned into a clown show terribly, terribly quickly. This
idea, though, of course, she's saying that she's walked away, that she hasn't been sacked.
No, she's been sacked.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the reality.
But then again, why is he then kicking sand in our eyes about that? Why doesn't he say, if he wants to appear, why does he say, I've sacked her?
To protect her dignity. I mean, look, she's someone that he's got a lot of time for. He doesn't want to sort of dance on her grave, but he's clearly, I think, taken the right decision to remove her. But we need to regain that sense of momentum. I don't think, Steve, it's a clown show. You know, we had 14 years of that, but we need a better sense of coherence and direction about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I think that will come. And, you know, you talk about the popularity ratings. Let's see where we are in 18 months, 2 years' time, as the government begins to deliver on its agenda.
The trouble with the popularity is it appears, when you look into the numbers of prime ministerial popularity, they only ever go down. They never go up when once a Prime Minister is in office. Tony Blair came in 97 with a 60-point lead. By 2007, it had fallen to minus 27 points. John Major came in at 1990 with a 15-point, and they fell 42 points. Things only ever go downhill. And this is an Ipsos political monitoring survey, which has been going for 50 years. So I don't see how this is ever going to improve for Starmer.
Well, it's very difficult to see how it would. All the decisions that need to be taken are very, very difficult ones. Some of the easy decisions have been taken the wrong way. So, for example, getting rid of the incentive to stop the boats, of sending people off to Rwanda. You would think that he would have done anything rather than release those convicted criminals early. So some of the things which ought to have been easy decisions, they've made the decision the wrong way. But the truth is governing is very difficult. If you look at the OBR's figures, with revenue soaring away and taxes stagnating, the spending decisions that Labour are going to have to take are going to be very, very tough, whether they like it or not.
But Steve, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I? But a lot of the problems we've been dealing with are inherited from the last Conservative government. You talk about the early prisoner release scheme. Alex Chalk, as Justice Secretary, told Sunak week after week after week, you either build new prisons or you agree to early release. Yeah. We had no alternative when we came into power.
But we left office with a big prison building programme in place. I'm sure that's what I discovered when I went into my hustings. But, you know, as I say, all these problems are difficult. And where I would agree with you about inheriting the problem, I mean, I've been banging on about this for 14 years. Since about the early 70s, governments have refused to face up to the appalling cost of age-related spending. National insurance contributions didn't go into a sovereign wealth fund to pay for people's pensions. They got spent on pensions at the time. And the result is that there's a massive gap in the public finances for the rest of our lifetimes, whoever's in power. And the crazy thing is that on something like retargeting benefits for pensioners towards poorer pensioners, the Conservative Party, in my view, has put itself on the wrong side of the argument. Yeah. We should be lifting up poor pensioners, and we shouldn't be giving benefits to pensioners who don't need them. I mean, when winter fuel allowance came in, it was a byword for waste among better-off pensioners in Wickham, who'd either buy a good bottle of whiskey or give it to charity. And
which
now,
is where you were the MP, of course.
Pardon?
Just Wickham was where you were the MP.
Yeah, where I was the MP. But it was a byword for waste, and, you know, now the Conservative Party, I think, has set itself up to look very foolish at Rachel Reeves' budget.
Well, we're going to talk about the VAT on private schools in the next section, but this winter fuel issue, it's not going away, Bill. And I think most people would agree, like Steve just said, that if you are a millionaire pensioner, you don't need it. We're all on board, and that was clearly why they came out thumping on this issue. We're going to get rid of the winter fuel allowance. Oh, and then they've pitched it too low. And if in the budget Rachel Reeves has to come out and amend this, does that look like strength to have reassessed, or will that look like some sort of, will it look like weakness? Well, they got it wrong.
All governments adjust decisions that they take as they move forward. But there's always been a case for means testing the winter fuel allowance. And public opinion is far more nuanced on this than the press and media would have you believe. I saw a poll last week. It's virtually 50-50 in terms of whether people support means testing or not. So I think the right decision was taken in principle. I do think the threshold at the pensions credit level was too low, and I think there will be some adjustment on that in the budget. And I think that's the right thing to do.
Is Alistair Campbell right, Steve, when he says that everything's going fine? The only issue is that everybody holds Labour to higher standards than the Conservatives. What is he getting at?
Well, that's the first time he's ever made me laugh. I've met him once and we didn't get on terribly well because of his various histories in the previous time that Labour were in power. But that is ludicrous. I mean, what is the evidence that Labour are treated more harshly? I mean, it's a statement made without justification or evidence, and I found it really quite ridiculous.
And it sounds very arrogant.
Oh, well, it's just, it's absolutely ludicrous.
We are just better, and we must be held
after everything we've been through.
It wasn't the only thing Alistair was saying about the crisis, and if you listened to him, he was making some measured criticisms of the government. However, it is an objective reality that Labour governments, because we have progressive values, are held to a higher standard than the Conservative Party. But that's a reality of political life.
By who? What do you mean by who? Who holds Labour to higher standards than we would the Conservatives?
I think the media do, the public do, because they say you're these good progressive people with good progressive instincts. we therefore need to judge you more harshly than the Conservatives.
You see, I don't think the left can have a monopoly on being good anymore. If the last 100 days has taught me anything, it's that. What is good about the policies that have been enacted?
It's very difficult not to laugh about this one, Bill. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. When I was elected in 2010, and you'll remember it, I'm afraid, very well, the expenses scandal, well, indeed, but the expenses scandal was the issue of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And ever since then, I think I and everybody else in Parliament has understood that politics is war minus the shooting. You don't take money, you don't take anything, you can't scrupulously justify in public. I thought everybody'd learned that. And then we've been through this ridiculous debacle of clothes and spectacles. I mean, you know, these varifocal rimless glasses are quite expensive when I pay for them myself. But the idea that a politician would have their spectacles paid for by someone else, by a rich man...
Mine are 15 quid.
Amazing, amazing.
The reality is Labour has broken no rules, unlike the last Conservative government who consistently did break the rules around the ministerial code and so many other issues. However, it's not a good look. And I think that's where I'm sensing towards agreeing with you. And the decision Starmer has taken and why he paid back the £6,000 is he's drawn a line of the general election and made sure that he is not going to take any donations, and that's what they are, donations from supporters. It's not abuse of public funds. He will not take any donations whilst he is Prime Minister. We've got to be held to that, and we've got to make sure that it's carried out across the board.
Did you ever get any massive donations on a personal level, either of you? Anybody come along and say, I'm going to buy you suits for you, Bill?
No, but I, like many people, you know, I accepted tickets to Wimbledon, for example. I don't think I ever... Yeah, no, I did receive a ticket to football. It's been common practice across the parties. I think the lesson from this experience is you can't do it moving forward. But
you see, I don't mind about the visits to things. Sometimes I think, you know what, go and do your networking. Go and meet people. Go and find, you know, go into the boxes, meet business people. Like, I'm all right with those visiting things. It's the stuff I find a bit weird.
Well, yes, but so to answer your question directly, I think the closest I've ever come to any kind of common ground was going to Wycombe Wanderers at their expense, which is meticulously declared. But I don't think many people will object to the local MP supporting the local football team.
How much does it normally cost to go to Wycombe Wanderers?
Honestly, I can't remember. In
20
the director's
quid.
no, now steady on. But no, look, the thing is about the visits is that the reason that commercial and vested interests generally want a politician to go to these visits is so they can control who's around them, so they can get messages to them. That's why they do it, and that's why going to visits is controversial. You know, whether it's dinners or whatever, and you can't avoid it in politics. You're there to represent, and that includes listening to interests. But it's one thing to go to a dinner in the House of Commons with 20 or 30 other MPs when you're a backbencher and hear out a charity.
Yeah.
It's another thing to go and sit in a box at the tennis with a very tightly controlled set of people around you who plainly are there in order to impress upon you as Prime Minister their particular special vested interests.
Or soon to be Prime Minister.
Indeed.
Potentially even more dangerous.
Yeah.